The unseen truth story. In a quiet suburban town in the U.S., 16-year-old Maya Simmons, an outspoken and talented high school student, faces her biggest challenge yet. Maya is known for her intelligence, her passion for social justice, and her dream of becoming a lawyer. However, her high school experience has been far from easy. Maya is one of the few black students in a predominantly white school, and while she has always kept her head high, the subtle, and sometimes not so subtle, racism she faces makes each day a battle. Mrs. Calloway, an older teacher who has been at the school for over 20 years, is known for her strict and harsh teaching style. Maya has always felt uneasy around Mrs. Calloway, but the bullying had always been indirect comments about how black students were always the loudest, or how well-spoken Maya was for someone from her background. Maya had brushed these off, keeping her focus on her studies. But things take a darker turn one day during a history class discussion about civil rights, as Maya passionately defends her views on equality and justice. Mrs. Calloway interrupts her with a sneer, mocking her opinion and belittling her knowledge of the subject. The class is silent, and the tension is palpable. Mrs. Calloway's remarks grow more aggressive as she points out Maya's perceived lack of understanding of history and accuses her of being too sensitive. With every word, Maya's anger builds. Finally, unable to take any more, Maya stands up, her voice shaking with emotion, and shouts, "You have no idea who I am!" The classroom goes dead quiet as Mrs. Calloway smirks, clearly enjoying the moment. Maya, trembling with frustration, begins to speak about her family history, her lineage, and the struggles her ancestors faced for the very freedoms they now take for granted. She mentions how her great-grandmother had fought for civil rights in the 1960s, how her mother had been the first in their family to attend college, and how she too is fighting to break barriers in a world still dominated by racism. As Maya's voice grows louder, a strange look crosses Mrs. Calloway's face. Her expression falters, and her eyes widen in recognition. The room goes even quieter. Just as Maya is about to continue, Mrs. Calloway suddenly stands, her face turning pale. You're her granddaughter?" she stammers. Maya's voice falters, confused. "What are you talking about?" The teacher stumbles back, muttering under her breath. I didn't know it was you. Your grandmother was my best friend. We grew up together. She was the reason I became a teacher. Maya's heart races as Mrs. Calloway's past slowly unravels. The teacher, once a close friend of Maya's grandmother, had been part of the civil rights movement years ago. But a secret had been buried, a personal betrayal during a pivotal moment of that movement, something that divided them both. Over the years, Mrs. Calloway had buried her guilt and resentment, letting it fester into bitterness, projecting her inner conflict onto students like Maya. For the first time, Maya sees the cracks in the teacher's icy facade. She had been so focused on Maya's skin color, seeing her as a symbol of everything she had suppressed, that she failed to see the young woman standing before her, the granddaughter of the woman who had once been her closest ally. The whole class watches as Mrs. Calloway breaks down, a tear slipping from her eye. "I was wrong," she whispers. "I was so wrong. I let my shame turn me into someone I hate." Maya, stunned but resolute, takes a deep breath. "You've hurt me, but I'll never stop fighting for what's right." "It's never too late to change, Mrs. Calloway. You can still make things right." As the class slowly processes what has just transpired, Maya leaves the room with her head held high, knowing that the truth had finally come to light, not just for her, but for the teacher as well. And as for Mrs. Calloway, She stands in silence, confronting the ghosts of her past, wondering if, after all these years, she could ever find redemption. Morale of the story. The story speaks to the power of confronting hidden prejudices, the importance of understanding one's history, and the courage it takes to stand up against those who perpetuate hate, even if that person once stood by your side. The past shapes who we are, but it doesn't have to define our future. Redemption is possible.